Hi guys and gals, Shane Stevenson, Director of Museum Collections here at the Buffalo Naval Park, and I'm standing in the almost completed Admiral's Quarters, so you get a nice view of what it's going to look like when everything is complete. So this is a kind of a sneak peek for you. Alright, so there we go there. And so this will be completed soon. Kudos to the crew, Bill Abbott. We worked all in conjunction to make sure that this space comes back with some of the accoutrements and dignity that the space deserves. But for today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 60th anniversary of the USS Thresher. Right, now, why would I be talking about that here at the Buffalo Naval Park? Well, it's because in our collections we have a memorial book that was produced in April of 1964. So on the 10th of April 1963, USS Thresher goes down during deep water trials and deep water testing. And then a year later, they came out with a memorial book. So I'm going to show that. But a little bit about USS Thresher, SSN593, was commissioned in 1961. Certainly SSN means nuclear sub. It was the first of its class. And then, of course, after its loss, the class changed to the Permit class, the second boat built after the USS Thresher. So she was in service for 2 years or so, came back to Portsmouth Naval Yard in New Hampshire and to get a refit, and then was on deep sea trials on the 10th of April. She was lost. Subsequently, there was, they went out searching for the boat, and eventually in 1964, I believe it was, they found it and started to photograph the wreckage. All right, so let's see. Here's the book in our collection. Tenth of April, 1963. And what this is, it's broken up into various different sections. But there's some memorials, there's some letters of condolences in here, but really the main focus is the biographies of the gentlemen that served aboard. They give a little bit about the ship. There's a nice watercolor painting. Assume that's a watercolor, might not be, but. And then the officers, the ship's crew. And then unfortunately also from the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, there were 17 workers from the shipyard itself who were also lost. So it starts off with the officers and it's alphabetical. And then there's a biography of the individuals. And then of course at the very end it talks about next of kin and family and things like that. So each of the 129 officers and civilians that were on board, they each have a photograph and a biography of them. So what happened, the investigation showed that there may have been a burst pipe. They were about at maybe 900 feet, 1,000 feet. A pipe in the engine room burst, which brought on water, which then potentially short-circuited the nuclear reactor. And they tried to do an emergency blow of the ballast tanks to get a quick rise to the surface. Also at that time, I don't know if it was a fault or it wasn't incorporated into the plans, but when you want to do an emergency blow, you have all of that compressed air sitting in the tanks, the compressed air tanks that shoot down this little pipe or valve into the ballast tank, which then pushes out the water. Well, at that depth, the investigation showed was that the compressed air, once it was released out of the tank, froze. And so that pipe or that valve filled with ice, and the air was not able to get into the ballast tank to then push the water out and to then resurface. So this happened in the morning, around 9 o'clock in the morning. They were communicating with the Skylark, I believe, which was the vessel on the surface. I have some notes here. It says they received a message that said 900N, all right, and exceeding test depth. Those were garbled messages, and during the investigation, they didn't really know what to make of those phrases. Well, obviously, exceeding test depth is self-explanatory, but what the second to last message, 900N, they really didn't understand what that meant. And so obviously it just continued to sink in about 8,000 feet of water and then eventually imploded, which the ship on the surface registered and recorded. One of the things to come out of this was the creation of SubSafe, right, which was very rigorous safety inspections and testing on submarines. And since that time, since SubSafe was enacted, only one sub has been lost due to malfunctions, and that's the USS Scorpion, and that was not an actual SubSafe submarine. So, because it's the 60th anniversary this past Monday, wanted to pull out this book. So if we get... Here was the CO, John Wesley Harvey. All right, so he was the one in communication during the investigation. The messages were from him. All right. Then the other officers, again in alphabetical order. And then it leads to the enlisted crew. And we go through the enlisted crew. What I like to show is we had Raymond Peter Foddy, or Fody. All right, he was actually from Rochester, New York. All right, and then he moved to Webster, which I believe is a suburb of Rochester. So that hits a little close to home here in Buffalo. One of the things I like to do is to talk about how submarines and surface ships are representative of America. And there were 38 states represented on this boat. The most being from New York and Maine. But we had Idaho, Colorado, Nebraska, West Virginia, Michigan, Indiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, even someone from the Philippine Islands, California, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Florida, and on and on. So 38 states at that time were represented. So again, the book runs through the enlisted crew, and then it gets to the civilians in the Navy shipyard in Portsmouth, civilian inspector, and I'm sure that these guys were thrilled to be on the boat. And also, unfortunately, their lives were truncated. Of course, the end of the book, there's the eulogy that was given during the memorial service, and expressions of condolences and sympathy from all over the country. The Prime Minister of Japan, the Ambassador to the Republic of Congo, Prime Minister of New Zealand, and then a prayer. So this book really expands of what was going on, expands our knowledge of what was going on at the time with the Thresher and the memorials around the Thresher. This seems to have been given to someone as a gift, and then it was donated at some point here. But it's a great way of honoring them in the 60th anniversary of the Thresher's loss and the 129 sailors, officers, and civilians on board. So please leave comments, questions, ring the bell, subscribe, become a member, all that fun stuff. And we'll remember the guys on SSN593. And we'll see you again soon.